This is Business Rockstars from the NASDAQ market site in Times Square. I'm Jeannie Yerman, and our guest today is Rahul Gandhi. He is the CEO and co-founder of MakeSpace. MakeSpace.
Yep.
As we discussed off camera, I had been reading about your company before I knew you were going to be a guest. And when I read about MakeSpace, I said, oh my gosh, I love this company. It is brilliant. What do you guys do? Let's tell the viewers.
So, I mean, if you've ever had the experience of going through self-storage, we've basically reinvented that experience. And it comes from my own background and my own experience that happened in Hurricane Sandy, having to go to a self-storage facility in an already stressful experience, and having to rent a car, go to the unit, having to pay for a much bigger unit than I actually needed, and the entire service component that didn't exist in the current product. For me, it was a bunch of light bulbs went off. And it said, well, how could, in today's day and age where convenience is such a big part of our life, whether it's getting a car through Uber or Lyft or other services, how could that not certainly exist in the storage business? And I teamed up with two entrepreneurs, and we decided that in order to disrupt the market, we needed to create a customer-first, convenience-focused service that took out all the pain points. So having to go to the facility, well, we do that for you. We send a team of movers. We pick up your stuff, we take photo inventory of all of your stuff so you can see exactly what you're storing in the system, and we do that at a cost to you that's on par, if not less than what you would pay the traditional storage unit. And the way we do that is we actually pull the real estate outside of the city, and we use industrial parks, and we use sophisticated technology that allows us to really create density inside of the warehouse so we can simply take that cost savings and pass it on to you. And the ultimate, collection of that is a great experience at the same, if not lower cost.
Oh, I wish you were around so many times.
Yeah.
So you mentioned you got together with two other entrepreneurs.
Yep.
First off, what were you doing before you started this? What was your background before you got into this? And then tell me about these two entrepreneurs and how you hooked up.
Yeah, so it goes back to my history all the way to when I was a young child. I grew up in an entrepreneurial family. My father was an immigrant here, and he started many restaurants when I was younger, and I felt the wrath of the downside. So I've lived through bankruptcy process after bankruptcy process. I think for me, early on, it was like running away from that, and just, I learned how to fend for myself pretty early, whether I was creating a baseball trading card company or things like that. I was able to kind of make money on my own, but I really valued stability in the earlier part of my life. So I took the traditional path when I came out and graduated from school, and I went into investment banking, really learned Wall Street for a couple years, ended up realizing that my passion was really behind technology, and so ended up moving from New York to Washington, D.C. to go work for AOL. And I spent about 4 years at AOL in their corporate development group, really acquiring companies all across the country. It was a fascinating job. And I learned, that's where the itch started. It was, hey, looking at really early stage entrepreneurs building amazing products. They hit an inflection point where either they couldn't raise more capital or needed a strategic home, and we were a good fit for them. But I started to get excited about that earlier part of business and started to come back to my roots. Ultimately went to business school, came back up to New York, and then when I graduated from business school, entered the world of venture capital. And so that's where I was before I jumped into MakeSpace, and I spent a number of years working at a local VC firm here in New York called Primary Venture Partners. Worked on several investments, sat on a few boards with that team, and really got to understand what it was like to get a business off the ground. And I'd always been upfront with the team there that, at some point it could happen. The itch could happen, and that's where MakeSpace came about, and put all my cards on the table and jumped into this head first. And to answer your question about the two entrepreneurs, they were folks that I'd known for a long time in New York, and as I studied other investments that I'd made in successful companies that I'd been a part of, it was really around that team dynamic in the early days, because you've got the world against you, and you're really trying to, especially going after a major industry like we were, disrupt. And for us, it was all about what's the makeup of the team? Like, how do you get through the hard periods? Do you want to be with these people every day? This is a marriage of sorts. And I was glad that I got to team up with Sam Rosen, who was the one who started the business with me. We brought in a CTO, a young CTO named Adam, who was at iHeartRadio, who helped us build the entire back end of the first system, and we were off to the races, and that's how we got off the ground.
You came into this already equipped, it sounds like, with a lot of the key components. You already kind of knew data, tech, you knew about investing. What did you not know when you started this business that you had to learn?
You know, the early days, it's about execution. You wake up every day, what you do there in that day is going to be the value that you add to this business and how quickly you move it forward. For me, as the role has changed for me over the last several years, I didn't understand how big of a sales component was really involved in this. And
Sales component.
Yeah, and it's really, you know, as a disruptor or any innovation that you have, you're coming out and trying to get your message out. You really need it to resonate with people. And so how do you go about doing that? And I think a lot of my background was more on the operations side. It was really like whether it was finance or true operations like I did, you know, at the company for the first couple of years. It was really about getting in the building blocks together as opposed to being front facing and talking, you know, whether it's to investors or press or just to everyday customers that really want to learn more about why is MakeSpace better. And that's really one of the skill sets that I think is very undervalued, and particularly when you get off the ground as an entrepreneur, you don't realize that your role continues to transition over time, and that one skill set will be pretty critical for you as you grow.
What kinds of demands does now, you know, leading the company,
Yeah.
what does that put on you versus, say, when you were working in investment banking or venture capital? How is this role different from a kind of a personal perspective?
Yeah. So in many ways, it's a lonely role, right? Like you've got a lot on your shoulders. You've got to think about strategy, you know, how much runway you have for the company, what are the right goals to execute on to unlock more capital as you continue to raise. You've got to think about HR and culture and all these various things that are happening in the organization. But I think, you know, doing this all over the last few years, I'm a single dad, I have twin daughters, and having to juggle that part of my life with, you know, making sure that everything we do from a business perspective are the right decisions, really motivating the team and making sure everybody knows what their role is and taking the company to the next stage, that's been really critical. And I think for me, the challenge is maximizing every minute that I have. And I've learned a lot, you know, having to, you know, when you have 8 hours in a day or 10 hours in a day to be able to execute with the rest of the team, every minute counts.
All right. Well, I wish you much continued success.
Thank you.
From the NASDAQ market site in Times Square, this is Business Rockstars.